Hey everybody, my name is Gabriel McArthur. I'm a contributor here at Real Progressives, and today we had a pretty big bombshell. I'm going to wait for some folks to enter the chat, and then we'll get started, because let's just say today's a good day. I don't know. There we go. We're going to wait for some folks to get in the room. All right. Now, I included the link for the video, the Steny Hoyer tape. I don't really know what else to call it but a tape. I feel like that's a really outdated thing to say. Hey, Catherine. I mean, I don't know what else to call it other than a tape. So we're just going to call it that. The clip, the video, I don't know. It's got some great animation. It's only about 5 minutes long. I did include it in the description for this video. If you haven't seen it, even if you've read the Intercept's article about the Steny Hoyer story, you've got to watch that video and hear it for yourself. Yeah, there's a recording. It has been a while. While we're waiting for folks to jump into the room, to give you a little bit of background on myself, okay? I got involved in politics for the Bernie campaign, like most people did. I became a national delegate for the convention in 2016, so that whole process was an eye-opening experience in and of itself. Someday I might write a book about it. Seems to be the cool thing to do is to write books about 2016, so why not me? And then after the election in 2016, I ran for Congress for a short period of time. So this Intercept story about Steny Hoyer, the Democratic whip there in the House of Representatives, I'm uniquely qualified to talk about it because, well, I was the first candidate to enter that race in Colorado Congressional District 6. And the background of the story is Levi Tillman, a progressive who entered the race shortly after I did, in December, had a conversation with Steny Hoyer. And Steny Hoyer was pressuring him to get out of the race. Now, Steny Hoyer is not the only prominent figure in Washington who was trying to discourage Levi from running. But Levi happened to get him on tape. And as I'm sure many of you have seen, it's gotten pretty good coverage. You know, MSNBC, CNN, they're not going to talk about it on their network, or if they do, it'll be a 5-second blurb at 2 in the morning. But I was running for Congress in Congressional District 6, and when Levi entered the race, I took a look at his platform, and I thought, well, those are the things that I'm about. And we've got a corporate candidate in the race who I have no interest in seeing go on to run against Mike Coffman. Now, Mike Coffman is the Republican incumbent in Colorado District 6. He's been notoriously hard for Democrats to beat. And the plain and simple reason for that is that Mike Coffman's a bit of a chameleon. He knows how to appeal to people who otherwise probably wouldn't vote for Republicans. The 6th congressional district in Colorado is a very wide-ranging district. There's a rural section of it. There is, the city part of it. Aurora is smack dab in the middle of that district. And Aurora is a very diverse place. It's not far from the Denver International Airport, so there's a lot of immigrants that live there. And Mike Coffman, the Republican, is actually pretty popular with the immigrant community there. And I think that's part of the reason why Democrats have such a hard time beating him, because he can change his stripes so easily. But when I exited the race, immediately after I sat down with Levi, and he told me what he was about, and he said, this is my platform, and I'm going to stick to it. And I thought it was important to boost up the progressive in that race. Now, Jason Crow is the establishment's pick. Jason Crow is central to this story because when I entered the race in December of 2016, I didn't get a single bit of coverage from that point until I finally had to call the Denver Post, because Jason Crow had entered the race and was already being called the front runner immediately after. So I called up the Denver Post and I talked to Mark Matthews, a reporter there, and I explained to him the situation. I've been running in this district for 3 months now, and Jason Crow is already being called the front runner. What's the deal with that? And this reporter, Mark Matthews from the Denver Post, straight up said to me, this might not be verbatim, this is pretty much what he said. He said, Jason Crow is the favorite of the the Democratic, I'm trying to word it the way he said it. He said, Jason Crow is the pick for the party powers that be. That's what he said. And immediately I asked him, well, how do you know that? He's only been in the race for a day and a half. He didn't answer that question. Neither did he publish the interview that we had. The 20-minute long interview I had with the Denver Post, never published it. So fast forward to when Levi Tillman enters the race and I exit. Now, part of the reason that I exited that race, number one, because Levi is a progressive and I didn't want to split the progressive vote and let the establishment candidate win. Jason Crow, don't really know much about his policy positions. He's a veteran that they're boosting up. And this is something that I was repeatedly told by Democrats in the 6th Congressional District, whether they be party officers or whatever. And some of these people, I might add, were Bernie people. They said, we need a moderate, a centrist, to go up against Mike Coffman. Now, Mike Coffman pretends to be a centrist. He's not, but he's good at pretending to be. And my reasoning for entering the race in the first place was we keep running centrist candidates against this centrist candidate, and he keeps winning every time. So it only makes sense that we do something different, speak to communities that haven't been spoken to, and be bold and as progressive as possible. And a lot of Democrats in that district, for whatever reason, don't feel that way. And throughout this time that I was part of the race, you know, all they talked about was money, how much money you needed to raise. Now, the first thing that I made sure that I had was a solid platform full of detail. Of course, real progressives had an influence in that because of modern monetary theory and making sure that we articulately know how to pay for things, right? But after I exited the race with Levi Tillman, I endorsed him, and immediately it was clear that the establishment was going to continue to try to railroad progressives. Diana DeGette is a member of the House of Representatives from Colorado's 1st Congressional District. Her team was trying to convince Levi Tillman not to run. Now, we all know what's happened as far as the Bernie campaign, Tim Canova's campaign, the election in Illinois, the election in Texas. We keep seeing these stories about progressive candidates who are being railroaded by the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Candidate Committee. There's so many letters to remember in politics. It's exhausting. But in any case, we've seen this happen, right? And even with the WikiLeaks, which came out right before the convention while we were actually in Philadelphia, you know, we saw Debbie Wasserman Schultz resign. We saw several other members of the DNC resign. We saw the emails. The problem was the Democratic Party presented them as hacked emails, as we're seeing with this recent lawsuit where Tom Perez is trying his darndest to protect democracy. The problem with WikiLeaks isn't that they weren't true. The problem is they're in a gray area because they were electronic that people can claim they're not true. So what's important about this tape specifically, where Steny Hoyer tells Levi Tillman repeatedly, I want you to leave the race, And Levi pushes back and says, well, we're still in the midst of a primary. There's 5 months before people even start voting. Why are you pushing this candidate so hard? Why is the DCCC getting involved? Aren't they supposed to help all Democrats? Is this a democratic process? And Steny Hoyer was basically just like, this is the way things are done. We rig primaries, and we get in early. We fund the hell out of them. They win their primaries, and then, as we're seeing in certain cases, that Democrat loses anyway. Now, this story is important because that tape didn't come from emails. That tape wasn't hacked. It wasn't leaked by anybody who could be labeled as a Russian. It was leaked by the candidate who was being told to exit the race. There's no way that anybody can claim that there was any kind of malfeasance with this. It's right there. And I think why that's important for us is because after all this time, after the chair throwing in Nevada that they lied about, after all the ways that they told us they were staying neutral, we finally have legitimate proof that nobody can deny. And more than that, Nancy Pelosi earlier today defended what Steny Hoyer said, basically saying, yeah, we have the right to interfere in primaries. Now, some of you have been following the DNC fraud lawsuit, and they've already said that in court. And I think what's really frustrating about this whole thing is you hear Democrats who most of the time might be on your side, but they look at this and they go, well, yeah, this is the way the DCCC does things. It's annoying, but it's what we got to deal with. And that is the fundamental problem with the Democratic Party, is you have all these Dementer people, which admittedly, I ran as a Democrat. I tried to do the Dementer thing and try to reform the party from within. That's a whole other story of shady things that were going on, or even just dysfunctional things. But a lot of progressive Democrats will harp and bitch and moan about what's going on in the Democratic Party, but at the end of the day, they'll still vote for those people. And I've had this argument plenty of times. We can't keep rewarding bad behavior. In no other situation does that make sense. If you're a coach for a football team and they lose the game, are you going to go, well, it's behind us now? No, you're going to watch the tape over and over again, if you have to figure out what went wrong. And if there were some people that were more to blame than others, you're going to spend more time focusing on what they need to do right, or you fire them. If your kid gets caught with their hand in the cookie jar, and you say, well, I'll let you keep it this time, but next time you're going to be in so much trouble, do you really think they're going to stop trying to take the cookie out of the cookie jar? No. In no other situation does that logic make sense. Well, they're better than the Republicans. That is probably the single most toxic logic that is infecting our society. On either party. Well, my team is better than the other team. So, damn it if my team does something wrong. It's what we got to work with. Now, I've been fighting with... in fact, I got into a Twitter fight with one of the leaders of the Third Way organization. For those of you that don't know who the Third Way organization is, they epitomize what the Clintons were about, triangulation and moving the Democratic Party to the right, this centrist, austere strategy, neoliberal, basically. And they're defending what Steny Hoyer said, and I've seen a lot of Democrats defend what he said. Well, it's a private organization. We should be able to pick who we want to. They just filed a lawsuit saying that they were protecting democracy from interference. So, yes, and I'm going to get to MPP here in a little bit, because I'm 100% on board. I'm working on the Colorado Progressive Party, or People's Party, rather. But I want to really stress the importance of the Steny Hoyer story and share it far and wide. Share this video, share the article, share the video of Steny Hoyer saying what he said. Because what we're watching happen is a lot of progressive news outlets or progressive organizations are calling for Steny Hoyer to resign. The problem with that is that it's basically the same thing as what happened with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. When I was talking to a lot of Hillary supporters during that time, the funny thing was, that's the one conceit that they would give us, is, oh yeah, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, oh yeah, she was terrible. She did so much damage to our party. I'm so glad that she was fired, you know, even though she had a job with the Clinton campaign that day. That day. The problem with these calls for Steny Hoyer to resign is that they're using him as that sacrificial lamb to say, see, no harm, no foul. We took care of the problem. No, this is a systemic issue. I'll be the first to say, there are plenty of Democrats who are in there with the right intentions. There are plenty of dementor people who legitimately are trying to reform the party. But what I see when I look at that is a bunch of people sitting in a boat full of holes with a bucket. It keeps sinking, and they just keep scooping. They might keep it, you know, a little bit above the surface, but that thing's still going down. So, you know, this isn't a bash Democrat session for me. This is looking at reality. We have a right-wing agenda in our country that is gone wild. And it's been in part enabled by Democrats. I mean, look at the vote on Pompeo. The Democrats who voted for Mike Pompeo as Secretary of State is proof that a big tent party doesn't mean shit if you got Democrats voting like Republicans in Congress. And that's the problem. People are willing to do that. You know, even in Colorado alone, Governor John Hickenlooper, who I guess is going to be running for president, so you'll be hearing about him soon, has done nothing to regulate fracking. He's a Republican. He's a Republican who's cool with gay people and pro-choice. And at this point, we have to tell our Democratic friends, gently as possible, because we're not going to change the dynamic if we go attacking everybody. We have to provide these pieces of evidence, and we have to say, look, I'm not speaking to you from an emotional standpoint. I'm speaking to you from a logical and a historical standpoint. We have to do something different. The Democratic Party can't protect us anymore from a right-wing agenda. They've enabled it. Every time they go to the center, it allows the right to go even further right. And all of these progressive candidates that are being railroaded, one of the things that I hear about them is, especially from, you know, vote blue no matter who Democrats, is, well, you know, I liked them, they just weren't viable. Does that sound familiar to you? That's what they said about Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders proved you don't need to take dirty money, and you don't need to have enormous name recognition. He got 45% of the vote in the Democratic primary of 2016 against one of the most well-known and powerful figures on the planet, not even just in America, on the planet. He was within striking distance. As a matter of fact, if they didn't have superdelegates, neither Hillary nor Bernie would have had the pledged delegates needed to secure the nomination. What that would have meant is that we would have had a real primary fight. We would have had a real contested convention. That was probably one of the biggest disappointments for me, being a delegate to that convention, was, you know, you have these romantic images in your head of how things are going to go. And then reality hits you in the face, and you look around and you realize, I'm in the middle of a giant infomercial that's all controlled. They got choreographers in the audience telling us when to stand up, telling us when to cheer, telling us when to smile. I'm not even kidding you. They would go like this, smile. When somebody got up to go to the bathroom, they'd have a seat filler come in. All that stuff's real, and we all know that. But we have got to tell our Dementor friends, look, if there's a Democratic candidate who is consistently progressive and is unabashedly progressive, sure, We're willing to help them out. But it's time for us to enter the 21st century, and it's time for us to say, enough with this two-party shit. It's time for us to do something new. Now, Colorado is a unique place because we just voted in for open primaries. So I'm really interested to see how the Steny Hoyer story affects the primary, because unaffiliateds can now vote, which, by the way, I became one last week. It felt great. It's not the first time I've left the Democratic Party, but it will be the last time. And it's not a matter of anger. It's not a matter of revenge for me. It's not a matter of I'll show them. I do have those moments. But more than anything, it's we need to do something now. We need to have a sense of urgency. And those people who are telling us, yeah, I get it, this Democrat isn't exactly what we want, but nobody's perfect. We got to vote for him. Here's what you tell them. I'm not asking for perfect. We're not even getting decent. Give us decent, then we can ask for perfect. You know, we get so wrapped up in the anger of these issues, and I understand that. But if you hit them with logic, they can't argue with you. Going through the democratic process, I can't tell you how many people told me if there was another option, I'd take it. So I think with Steny Hoyer being recorded saying that they unabashedly interfere in primaries, and Nancy Pelosi unabashedly backing him, and many of the Democratic lobbyists and pundits in Washington also backing him, we have all this evidence now that the Democratic Party isn't serving the people. We all know the Republicans don't serve people, okay? But talking about piss tapes, talking about porn stars, talking about, I don't know, Kanye West's new love affair with Donald Trump, it's easy, it's low-hanging fruit. It's easy to criticize Donald Trump. There's a lot to criticize him for. It's not easy to go up against your friends and your family who are deeply committed to the Democratic Party. But we got to do it. And I don't mean attack them. I mean we got to go at them with facts, go at them with logic, go at them with the evidence. Burners, some burners, especially those in the Dem Enter movement, I think there's three categories. There is the true reformers who, you know, they're in the Democratic Party, but they won't necessarily vote for a Democrat in the general election if that person's not representing their values. Those people are great. But then you have these two other camps of people. You have the burners who've suddenly gotten a job or suddenly gotten some kind of influence within the party, and suddenly they become friendlier and friendlier to the establishment until they get to the point that they actually start defending the establishment to you, to progressives, or trying to do this pretzel logic about you know, how the party isn't as bad or it's changing. You know, in some places, yes, the Democratic Party is getting better, but the National Party is going to drag everybody down with it. You know, when we're talking about Colorado's primary and the DCCC's interference, one thing I can tell you is the Colorado Democratic chair, Morgan Carroll, she's been really fair. She's criticized the DCCC. She's been open about the fact that she's pissed off that Washington is interfering. But there aren't enough people like her in the party to change it. What we need to take away from this is they're not even trying to hide anymore how they're treating people. They're not even trying to hide anymore that they feel they have a right to pick who they want because that person's going to make the money. You know, I talked to go back to that third way strategist who attacked me on Twitter. He was like, you know, there's nothing wrong with the DCCC fielding candidates, finding people who are stronger, you know, have a better following or have more money behind them. That's just good strategy. If it was good strategy, you would have lost the majority in every level of the federal government and a lot of state houses. Because that's just something that we got to hit them back with, right? They told us that Trump had a 99.9% chance of losing. He's president. They told us that in Nevada, Bernie folks were violent, throwing chairs. There were thousands of cameras in that room, not a single video of a chair being thrown. What else did they say? They said, it was constant. The misinformation, the lies, the deceit was constant. And now we're expected to trust those very same people when it comes to the Russian hacking narrative. Now, to be clear, the Russians probably did try to hack us, just like they've probably tried to do every year since the 30s. We've been playing spy versus spy for a long time now. Why is it suddenly a problem? And not only that, they weren't successful. Now, I didn't tell you is after I dropped out of the race for CD6, I ran for Colorado Secretary of State. And, my my opponents were it was the same thing. They were very corporate, pretty much chosen. They came out striking with endorsements. 192 countries tried to hack the election infrastructure for Colorado. Something like that. It was over 100. Not one of them were successful. So there's all this fear-mongering going on to try to corral us into a very, very narrow, very specific way of thinking. And what they try to tell us is, well, if you vote for Jill Stein, or you vote for Gary Johnson, or you vote third party in any election, you're falling prey to the spoiler effect. And what's even worse is a lot of those people that tell you that, they say, oh, I'd love to see a third party do well. I'd love to see an independent win a race. But the spoiler effect. What you need to hit them back with is, okay, what are you doing to get rid of the spoiler effect? Are you pushing for ranked choice voting or other alternative methods? Are you pushing to reform the Electoral College so that third parties have a shot? Are you calling the Commission on Presidential Debates to demand that they let other people in? No, they're not. They're just trying to shut you down. So we got to hit them back with logic, with information, with, okay, what are you doing? So to wrap this all up, share that video that I've put the description in the link in the description. Share this video. Talk to your Democratic friends, and you sit down with them calmly as possible, and you say, look, I get it. I understand. You're comfortable where you are, or this is all you've ever known, or you're afraid of what the right-wing agenda is going to do to this country. I get it. Trust me, I get it. But that's precisely why we need to replace the Democratic Party with something that is truly opposing Trump and his agenda. It's not by sharing the P-tape story. It's not by sharing pictures of Stormy Daniels. What it is talking to people and saying, these progressive policies that we have, that we're presenting, they will benefit you and everybody around you. And selling these progressive ideas to independents and even some conservatives. That's how you win. That's how you, in the long run, that's how you win. So we got to wake everybody up. Share that video. Share this video. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night, everybody.